All right, so this is one of the first times I'm using more long form commentary on the channel, and I just wanted to go over something that would be a little bit more interesting and something a little more shareable. So here, I wanted to explain exactly why advanced movement shooters like Conclave often fail, because Warframe, as you know, Warframe has its own Conclave mode where it's player versus player, and you're using all of the same movement that you have in the regular game, and you're using it against regular, other players, and it entirely changes the dynamic of the game. And it is very difficult to learn if you don't have a tutorial, and it is, you know, and it has its own plethora of issues, and you have a whole bunch of problems where the regular game does not teach you how to be good at Conclave. Being good at Conclave is its own skill that you have to learn through years of practice, of losing, of, understanding how to set up your loadout, what you're supposed to do. And a lot of people think that that is just part of playing video games just in general, and it really isn't. I'd like to also bring up the fact that with Conclave, I don't think that Conclave is has its own problems. Conclave has the same problems that every single advanced movement shooter has had from the beginning of the genre. It's really been an issue for a very long time. Now, I want to bring up, like, our main problem is the absence of a story mode or a tutorial, and that's what's been killing advanced movement shooters. So without playing through something to learn how the game works, you're getting on multiplayer and you're thrown into lobbies against the best people in the world. You don't have any preparation at all. AMS games, so advanced movement shooters, AMS games, already have a small community because they rival regular FPS games, because they could just be like, oh, well, I don't really want to play this game that has, all these jetpacks and wall bouncing and backflips and whatnot. I'm just going to play regular Call of Duty. That's who you're competing against. And regular FPS games are the biggest genre in gaming just in general at the moment. And then this is made even more problematic because you have to deal with these mismatched lobbies where you're playing against people, been playing the game for years, some of the best in the world. And that's a result of having a big community, having a small community that's now split up by region. So if I'm playing in, the Pacific time zone, and everybody else there is just like, either they don't really play as much, for example, if I'm on Conclave and I'm using recruit conditioning. Recruit conditioning is the version of Conclave with the lobbies where you're able to just only play against people who are at your level, who are, beginning just like you. But most of the time, you're not going to find anybody who joins the game when you have that on. The only way to get into a game is if you turn it off and you're allowing yourself to play against the people that are at these super high levels who've been playing this for years and years. And that is part of the problem. It's a result of having a small community that's now split up by region. You could probably find somebody who is at your level if you had the ability to go to different regions and be like, oh, well, I'm playing in the Pacific Ocean region, right? And, the west of the United States, and I'm playing against somebody in South America. I'm not able to play against that person because of the regions. And now and realistically, I would be able to have a much better game against somebody who, just because of their level, but it's split up by region. That's the issue. And then on top of that, you also have a lot less people that want to play it because they're losing to people who aren't at the skill level, and it's not fun. And then on their side, it's not fun to beat people who are below their skill level, and it gets boring after a while. And that's why a lot of these, super seasoned Conclave players, they often quit the game, or they often just stop playing in general because there's nothing left to achieve. And also they're just constantly up against these same people that are at their level, like, all the time. And it's genuinely like you're fighting the greatest match ever and nobody sees it. Like, it doesn't really matter. You're just doing that for bragging rights, basically, or to clip somebody and put them in a montage of whatever you were trying to do. It's an issue. And then there's a whole bunch of more games that have the same issues that Conclave does. And we're going to bring up Destiny's Crucible as well. You know, rest in peace to Destiny 2. But a lot of the issues with Crucible specifically was because of the fact that there's no real tutorial about how it works. And it's also the fact that there's not as many people playing it. But I will admit, Destiny's Crucible is a lot more boots on the ground. It's a lot more similar to the regular game as opposed to Conclave. And that's why, obviously, Crucible had a lot more people playing it during its peak. And that part is completely fine. But Crucible also had a lot of issues with balancing weapons, a lot of issues with overpowered abilities. And these kinds of things are what keeps people away from wanting to play that consistently, because they keep losing to something that they know isn't fair, and then they use it against somebody else. It's like, okay, let me just, if you can't beat them, join them. And now you just have more of the same problem. So it's games like that where it's like, okay, you're not really fixing the issues, you're just, letting it go along. And then you also have Apex Legends. Once again, Apex is in its own very specific niche where you have a really good battle royale game, a really great battle royale game, but it requires so much. It has a very steep learning curve with the movement. You have to understand exactly how everything works, and then you just have a lot of things that's genuinely wrong with Apex Legends just in general. You have the weapons with the RNG. Sometimes they don't straight up don't give you a weapon. Sometimes, they have server issues. Sometimes you're playing against some of the best people in the world. Just like I said, you're playing against some of the best people in the world for no reason, when you just started, or you're playing against, or just playing with your friends. And these are issues that Apex has had consistently, along with balancing issues, along with glitches, along with so many other things that are just like, that keep people away from wanting to play the game. And this is so interesting that Apex Legends could have an incredible story mode for their game. An absolutely incredible story mode for their game. The lore that all of their characters have, and then their connection to the same Titanfall universe. They could have one of the greatest story modes for a game ever if they put the time and effort into doing that. And not only that, they could also they could bring so many people to that game by having that story mode. They could also have so much that they can add. There's so many people that they can add to the game by teaching them how the rest of the game works through the story mode, as if you were supposed to play through the story mode and then play the regular game. That's how it's usually supposed to work. That's how it's supposed to go. That was how it was back on Call of Duty. For me, it was Modern Warfare 3, Modern Warfare 2. You play through the story mode, you understand how the game works, and then you play multiplayer. And it's like, okay, I'm new at multiplayer. I'm not going to be the best right now, but at least you understand the bare basics of what you're supposed to do. At least you can get, a couple kills and contribute to the team. If you're on team deathmatch, you can still manage to win a game by getting carried by everybody else. And from there, you can expand and do what you want to do. Here, you're doing everything by yourself. There's no tutorial. The only tutorials that you're going to find on YouTube are just on YouTube. And then YouTube has a lot of and then sometimes there's a lot of I would say unupdated tutorials or overcomplicated ones, whereas there's just things that aren't applicable anymore. There's methods to learn that really aren't there. And then a lot of the time you're just playing and learning as you go. And sometimes people are like, okay, I'm playing with my friend and he's telling me what to do and how to do certain things. A lot of the time it's not as consistent as if, okay, I play through the story mode, I make X, Y, and Z mistake in multiplayer, but I still understand the basics of what I'm trying to do. With Apex Legends, it is not going to be like that. It's going to be so much more complicated for almost no reason. And you also have these same kind of issues with Splitgate. There was 2 games in the Splitgate series, and I actually played these a lot more. And with Splitgate, it has the same kind of Halo feel, and that's what they were going for. But once again, the story of the game was non-existent. There was no lore at all. There was nothing. And then they just throw you in the game, and you're playing against some of the best people in the world, because the community is so small that you either are going to play against some of the best people in the world, one other guy who's maybe at your level, and then either once that game ends, you're playing against the same people again, or you're looking at a menu screen. Like, that is the only options with these kinds of games, because you're working off of half of your community. Half of your community is already gone because they're already going to these other FPS games that are regular. They don't want to jump through portals and, do all of these other things and use all these different types of weapons in order to defeat the enemy. They want to just do something regular. And that's the problem, where you have these games that could do so much more, that could have so much, and they're limited by the fact that they don't have a story mode, they don't have a tutorial, and they're working with this smaller community, and that's going to hurt them in the long run. And it's the same exact thing with why the finals died. It was not exactly the same kind of advanced movement shooter like Apex or Conclave, but it had the same idea where you're breaking through the walls, you have all these different weapons and whatnot. The final still has a decent community now, but regardless, you're going to have these issues later on, and some of them are starting to come up now, where these people don't have any actual competition if they're the best in the world. And then the people that are getting onto the game, those are their only opponents. They're still going to run into these problems, because not that many people are going to want to play a game that has this much going on and this much invested into it, unless somebody else is telling them, hey, let's play this game, it's free, let's show up and play this game, make it a little bit different from the games that we normally play. That's usually going to be the same thing. And unfortunately, this is exactly what happened with Fortnite. So with Fortnite, they have their own advanced movement technically with the building, and that's how that worked. And now a lot of people were like, okay, well, usually when you're playing against somebody who builds at him, you shoot at him once and then he builds an entire mansion. That's what it was like back when I was playing the game back in 2020. But regardless, Fortnite has gotten worse with that, because there are children that have genuinely grown up playing that game for their entire life at this point, and that is literally the only thing they know how to do. And they can build incredibly, but at the same time, you run into that same issue where you have people that are like for example, if I decided, oh, let me go back on Fortnite today, and just decide to play against people just because, oh yeah, I want to play, I would lose horribly, and I wouldn't have any way to win. Not because because I'm playing against people who are at incredibly high levels, who are doing these, building these incredible things, and I'm not able to keep up at all. I'm barely even able to build anything because either my settings are there, either my settings aren't there, or I'm just out of my prime with it, or I forgot how to do X, Y, and Z on this game. There's a lot of different issues, and then there's a whole list of weapons that they keep adding to the game. They keep removing weapons to the game. It gets a lot. And with that game, it's the same problem, but they have the opposite issue, where they have the biggest community out of everybody. But the problem is, once again, the story mode, as in Fortnite Save the World. For the majority of Fortnite's existence, Fortnite Save the World has been paid. You had to pay for that story mode. And that has, in a way, hurt the game, because essentially Fortnite Save the World allows you to learn how to build. That was like the whole point of playing Save the World. It's like, okay, I'm going to learn how to build by playing this. But at the same time, Fortnite Save the World obviously is not going to teach you these advanced techniques that everybody else has been using to build, on the rest of Fortnite, where they're like, okay, here's how you edit this, how you edit that, and you do it really quickly, and here's how you're able to build this, here's how you're able to, box people in, you're able to use this. All of that is not being taught to you by Fortnite Save the World, and it should be. It should be. They have had years and years and years to update it and add something where it's like, okay, we're going to teach these people how it works and show them what they're supposed to do. They have not done that. And they've essentially just abandoned Fortnite Save the World just in general when it comes to that story mode. So it's been the consistent issue where the story mode of the game is either completely disconnected from the multiplayer. It's either, just non-existent. And that is what's preventing people from getting involved in the game in the first place, where they're like, okay, well, what's the point of me going back to Fortnite if the only thing I'm going to do is lose? If they're going to put me up against the best people in the world all the time, what's the point? I'm just going to sit there and just lose and lose and lose and lose if I don't have a squad of people who have been playing this, for their entire lives. That's the problem with the game. And regardless, I've outgrown Fortnite regardless. It's a kid's game and I'm no longer a kid. It is what it is. But that is the issue with a game like that, where you have so many people playing it and so many people are that good. And then you have a community of people who are just like, you know what, maybe I want to come back to Fortnite. And then they lose immediately. And it's like, okay, yeah, I realize why I dropped this game, because these players are way too good, and then there's no separation. They don't allow you to get as good as them. That's an issue that they need to fix. And Fortnite actually can fix those issues, but they choose not to. And another problem that you also have with Fortnite is, like, there was a zero build mode on Fortnite that they added a while ago, and people have been playing it now. And the problem with that is that now it's you still have the same issue. They just like, oh, well, if people are building too much, let me remove the building and let's just put it up against skill and skill. And then from there, it's like, okay, that's a start. But regardless, there's still, entire gaps in between what you're trying to do. It's huge gaps where you have entirely new weapons, you have entirely new items, you have entirely new, even new characters being added into the game, entirely new map, like everything is all new, and somebody coming back to the game would have no idea what they're supposed to do, no idea who these people are. Even the way that you jump and move has been completely changed in the game. And regardless of the fact that you're adding builds or not, you're still going to be completely out of your element. You're still going to be completely outmatched by certain people on that game if you return to it. That's the problem. Now, if they had a proper tutorial where it taught you all of these different advanced techniques, or they showed how to use all of these new weapons in that tutorial mode, everything would be a lot easier for people to understand, and people will be more willing to come back. And you also make it clear that, hey, every time that you play this game, you're playing it up against people that are just as good as you are, that are at the same rank that you are at. They choose not to do that. And these are the issues that we have. Like, even this new game, Impulse, it's going, like, the game looks good. It's like a, its own version of Titanfall. And then I absolutely love Titanfall. But the problem is the fact that they're going to run into the same issue. They don't have a good story mode right now. They're going to run into the same issue. It's made by the same 1047 studios that made Splitgate. They're going to run into the same problem because they haven't fixed anything that gave them the problem in the first place. And it's not like they're completely oblivious to what I'm talking about. They know exactly what's going on because they have sat there and made the game. They sat there making the game for however many years it took, talking about the game with all the other game developers that's with them. They're going to come up with, hey, this is going to be a problem. They know that, and they're choosing not to fix it. And that's the issue. That's the issue. And then, mind you, right, you have other good examples of games where it was done right, where there were no issues with it at all. I would absolutely have to say Quake. Quake is what started the whole entire advanced movement genre. Even like the whole first person shooter genre can be arguably attributed to Quake, the original, the second one, the third, and then all of the tournaments that happened. Just a foundation of esports just in general when it comes to Quake. And that game, when its current state now, is a complete shadow of its former self when it comes to Quake Champions. There's next to nobody playing Quake Champions unless they've been playing Quake for, almost 20 years now, or as somebody who's just gotten really, really good at that game, or is really great at just advanced movement shooters in general. Like as of right now, that game is a shadow of its former self. And once again, we have these same issues where we have no story mode, right? We have no story mode. We have no tutorial to show you what's going on. You play the game and that's it. And then you're working with a smaller community. So you're going to end up playing against these same people that are at these super high levels. Meanwhile, everybody else is supposed to be at your level either doesn't play the game or they're not on right now. And it's over for you because now you have to play against him. That's the issue that we're going to keep running into when it comes to Quake. And regardless, if Quake is having these issues, what chance does everybody else have? Right? That's the difference between where way back when, back in 2004, where everybody was kind of new to this, genre, where they were really good, and then there was other people that were really good. Like it was a lot more structured back then, and there was a lot more where you're gonna sit there and teach this person, like, okay, here's how this works. There was a lot more for them to build on. There was a lot more for them to use and a lot more for them to learn. Like, because the genre was entirely new. Everything was new. Nobody really knew how to play Quake that well at the time compared to what they're able to do now. And that's the difference, where you had a lot more people that really didn't know what they were doing. So that means everybody's at the same level. It's a lot easier for you to begin at that point in time because, everybody's at the same level. Nobody really knows what they're doing. Okay. And then you're just playing against people. And now you're having fun. You're playing against people that you don't really know how it works. And now you're having fun. It's completely fine. And you also have games with parkour like Mirror's Edge. Mirror's Edge is an amazing parkour game. Mirror's Edge absolutely redefined parkour just in gaming in general. And when we come back to Mirror's Edge, we really can think about Mirror's Edge could have had its own multiplayer. And at the time, that multiplayer could have done extremely well at the time, because once again, a lot more people were going to be newer to the advanced movement shooter genre. They would have had a whole tutorial that walks them through how to move and how to use the parkour, a genuinely good story mode that's, just absolutely phenomenal. And they would have been able to get into that way easier. So a multiplayer version of Mirror's Edge would have been absolutely incredible. And then you also have the Titanfall series as well, which has been, once again, it is absolutely incredible, where they have a good story mode where everybody's able to start from somewhere and understand how the game works. And then it's like, okay, you're playing against some of the best people in the world when you get to that level, right? Before Titanfall, Titanfall is absolutely known for having a good ranking system where you're able to play against people who are at your level when you're just starting out. And that's very important. That's very useful. And that allows people to get to that level and stay there and play the game properly. like in other Call of Duty games like Advanced Warfare, Black Ops 3, they also had very great multiplayer, very great runs in their time. With Advanced Warfare, not as much. It's more of a retrospective kind of thing, more of like a hindsight, whereas it's like, yeah, you know, way back when it was actually pretty solid when I was playing it. And then the same thing with Black Ops 3. Black Ops 3 is absolutely one of the best advanced movement shooters ever. But, you know, as of like not, and also once again, in hindsight, the story mode for Black Ops 3 wasn't actually done that well. And I would say that story mode not doing as well is also the reason why the story modes have declined in the rest of the Black Ops games afterwards, outside of Cold War. But that's a story for another day. But regardless, Call of Duty, when it had its advanced movement, it was genuinely good. But if they did an advanced movement game now, it would run into the same problem, because they would have like a terrible story mode that nobody wanted to play, as they did with Black Ops 7. And now you have the same problem where nobody's going to play that story mode. Nobody's going to go out of their way to have it to read a tutorial about what's going on. Nobody really cares. And then you have the same issue where, okay, well, nobody wants to play the tutorial, or, you know, we don't have one. And then guess what? You run into the same problem where you have a bunch of beginners and nobody really wants to keep playing. And then either you play against one other guy, I guess, who just decided to join when he was a beginner just like you. And then you have the greatest team ever that's up against you. That is the problem. You're going to consistently have that. You're going to consistently have the same issue over and over and over and over again until you fix it, until you understand how it worked, until you take lessons from Titanfall, and you take lessons from the original Quake games, and you're like, okay, here's exactly what made this work, and here's exactly how I'm going to make it work on my game. That's the problem. And then to return back to Conclave with Warframe, like, you're usually like playing against the best players, and there's also an abundance of abusing unbalanced weapons in Warframes, and all of the examples I mentioned, they also have those problems as well, especially on games like on Fortnite, on Apex Legends, you know, even on Titanfall to an extent, they also had that, you know, and Black Ops 3 had multiple instances of that, and probably to this day have a couple weapons that are just, you know, overpowered, and they didn't really bother to fix them. These are the things that you really have as a consistent issue. But in Conclave, it's also a pretty big problem. So they're, you know, just abusing unbalanced weapons and abilities. And in my tournaments, where I have an actual rule set that's like, okay, you can't use this, and this, you know, and it's targeted at beginners who would be trying to use those weapons. And I'm like, okay, you can't use this, you can't use that. All right. And then I'm actually putting them up against each other based on their skill, because most of my players that I find haven't played Conclave before, or they only played 1 or 2 matches before. And when I put them against each other, they have a pretty good time. When I do my complete tournament, as you see in these clips, when I do my full tournament, they have a great time, and they tell me that they have a great time because they're playing up against people that are at their same skill level, you know, and everything is fair and balanced, and it's fine. They like playing Conclave, and they tell me that. I'm not just making that up. They tell me that, and it's like that gives me hope for Conclave and just advancing with shooters in general, but it also illuminates the problems that we had before, because I had to play Conclave for years in order to understand exactly how it worked, in order to put that rule set together, in order to understand, hey, these people need to be against each other, based on the fact that they are not as skilled, and, you know, just in general, that they're at the same level. That is what has consistently been the problem, and that is also what has been the solution as well. So I've also made my own Conclave guide, where I go in detail about everything that you need to know about Conclave and how exactly you're supposed to get good. Here's how you practice. Here's what you're supposed to do. And everything that you're supposed to do with Conclave, that tutorial that I sat there and wrote is once again addressing one of the issues that we had throughout this entire thing. And it is important to do that. It's important to do that. And you also have, and then I've also tried to have tournaments with experienced Conclave players as well. The guys that you would see in these montages and find in their Discord. I tried to have tournaments with them multiple times over the years. And it's just like, you know, they either can't show up to anything on time. They found some issue with the rule set that they made up, or, you know, they wanted unreasonable rewards but they don't trust tournaments with an entry fee, or, you know, they just flat out don't want to. Like, it's a bunch of excuses that these people make, right? And I imagine this is a pride issue, because if they lose to someone they play against all the time, it hurts their reputation because it's a small community, and then essentially they won't be able to talk the trash that they usually do in the chats, and it's a whole pride thing with them. And it's sad because these guys are so incredibly good at what they do, but nobody sees the majority of the matches that they're in. Nobody is seeing this person versus this person, and, you know, who is better at this point in time, or a trilogy between these people. Like, okay, he played him and he won that match, but he played it in a rematch, but he won it. And here's the final, you know, the showdown. Like, there's none of that because there's no initiative for them to do that. We could have had that, but they chose not to do that. And it's because of pride. It's because of the fact that they don't want to be embarrassed on a live stream, or embarrassed losing in a game. And it's sad. It really is sad that they can't just suck it up and be like, okay, let me play against this person because I want to show off my skills and I want to be the best, and I want to be up against the best people that I can possibly be against. And then a lot of these people, they only play Conclave. That's the only game mode that they play. They may play the regular PvE just because of weapons that they want to get, or, you know, a rank that they want to achieve or whatever. But outside of that, they're not going to compete in an actual tournament for survival or defense or spy or index or simulacrum like everybody else would. They're not going to do that. And then it's, once again, it's the same pride thing where they just don't want to be embarrassed, and they have these issues. And then once again, I don't think that these issues are unique to Conclave, and I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, these people are, you know, the worst people ever, and they're not, you know, doing what they're supposed to do. This is an issue that will be happening across all of these games that I've mentioned. So I'm not even going to really go on about that. There's a lot. There's a lot of issues. And for Conclave specifically, we have a lot that we have to go over. There's a lot that needs to change with that. And I also go over that in the bottom of my tutorial, like, okay, here's exactly how you change Conclave, here's how you make it better. But regardless, it needs a good tutorial. It needs some story mode missions that teach you exactly how to play Conclave, which would be interesting because they recently made a quest about Teshin, where he was able to be like, okay, this is a teacher quest, and then you go over to him, and then you're trying to, like, he basically just teaches you how to mod your weapon, but you could expand on that and then allow him to teach you moves for Conclave and get people invested and interested in that. And that would be very interesting. And then especially, but in order to do that and get people involved, they need to make an actual rank system that allows you to be like, okay, only beginners are able to play against beginners, and then everybody else is stuck playing against everybody else. And then as they build up their way through the ranks, then they can play against these people once they're ready for that. But the issue now is that if a bunch of people started playing Conclave right now, they would get stomped by these same people who have been playing it for years. And now it's like, okay, yeah, I don't want to play this anymore. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm just going to keep losing. I don't want to play this anymore. I'm not playing against people that's at my level. That's the problem. So that's the main solution, is where you create a basic story mode for games that are advanced movement shooters. You hire real writers who can expand on the different characters' lore, and then you create levels that build on these. And these are going to be, it sounds so simple to do, but at the same time, for a really good writer, it would take some time. it would take some time to make a tutorial like that. I understand that. And it just prolongs the launch of a game for a very long time. But at the same time, it's so incredibly necessary for the longevity of the game and to keep people invested in it. And regardless, you can still even add it afterwards if you want to. If it's really that serious, you can add that afterwards. But these are things that you need in order to prolong the game. And then we also need to abandon the free-to-play battle pass season model thing for a paid, we need to abandon the whole battle pass thing. And then we need to replace it for a paid game model with a story mode. A lot of the time, it's the games where you just have to pay for it regularly, and then it has its own story mode where it's the best. Whereas like Black Ops 3, Titanfall, Quake, you all have to pay for those games, and then you get a story mode involved with it regardless. That is important. That's important because now we're not working off of a battle pass where, every update, we're going to add this thing and we're going to remove this thing. And then like, you're going to sit in there, talk. They're trying to sell you skins and gun skins and all of these things. We don't need to focus on that. We need to focus on having a real tutorial. We need to focus on having an actual story mode. And then that allows people to get paid. That gets people paid. When you have a paid game, everybody has to pay for the game on release. And that is what gets people paid when they sit there and make a whole entire story mode and that prolongs the actual development of the game in order to prolong the game itself in general, because that allows you to learn how the game works before you get into multiplayer. Having that paid game model allows all of your investors and developers and publishers and everybody else to get paid right after the game releases, and making up for the fact that, hey, it's going to take a little bit longer to make a story mode. Hey, it's going to take a little bit longer, but we're going to stay on track. It gets everybody what they need and all of that. And it also gives you a lot more time to publish and market the game as well, which is very important. And all of these things are so vital to the game, but they're so overlooked. And you can sit there and add cosmetics, new characters, weapons, whatnot, and then you add that from update to update like everybody else. That's fine. And then along with sales that happen around the update time, you can be like, okay, so on Steam, you get the 70% discount or the sale that they're having, like those kinds of things that get people involved in the game. That's like, oh yeah, this update is happening and there's a sale for the game. And then you can sit there and have whatever guy sit there and be like, hey, I want my friend to play this game. Here's this sale, here's this update that's going on, I want him to play. And then there's something for him to actually play. There's a tutorial for him to go through. There's, a multiplayer that's waiting for him, and he actually knows how to play it because of the tutorial. And he's not up against the best people in the world immediately. That's what you're supposed to do in order to make this game last. And then you got to pay attention to the weapons, the characters, the abilities, and the tactics that are overpowered. And you got to use these updates to fix them. That's the point of what you're trying to do. You have to pay attention to what's overpowered, the same way I did with the Conclave tournament from before, where I made a list of things that are banned or, you can't use these. And I'm like, okay, you can't use them. They don't use them and everybody has a good time. That's what you need to pay attention to. You need to pay attention to the weapons that are overpowered. Either you nerf them or you replace them with something else. That's what you need to do in order to make the game playable. You can't keep doing that where you have characters and weapons that are just they just make the game unfun to play. They just make it like, okay, this is boring. Why am I playing this? And then once again, so my solution for multiplayer is like a King of the Hill. So it's a King of the Hill situation that occurs in a region. Essentially, all of the open lobbies have a King of the Hill who can join them. The King of the Hill is somebody who usually plays in that region. He's on a leaderboard. He has a reasonable undefeated streak, or he's generally just known by the community. These same, super incredible, great players that are just like better than everybody else, right? And then the same applies to those using a different region in order to play. So anyway, the King of the Hill joins and is made clear, and everybody else is like given an option to stay in the game or challenge him or get sent to another lobby, that kind of thing. If everybody chooses to leave, the King of the Hill can't join the game. and everybody can continue to play normally. And these extremely high skill level players can choose to turn off the King of the Hill option in the settings and would only be restricted to playing against people at their skill level. Due to the community size, these matches have to be scheduled between them. Those with the King of the Hill option can still join matches like this regardless. And then also you can also add local multiplayer as well, and that can help for the longevity of the game. But that is something that can be added later on, and you can figure that out. But local multiplayer is also really good in order to just be like, hey, I have my friends over, let's play this game together. And then now you have everybody here who is playing that same game, and maybe they want to go back home and download it and play it themselves because they liked it when they were playing at their friend's house. Like that kind of original concept of like, hey, I want to play this game. That's how people have been introduced to games for as long as I can remember. And this whole King of the Hill situation is going to be super useful for people because now these super high skill level players, even if you're in a small community, everybody is able to play at their skill level. So, and then if you don't want to do that, you have the option. You have the option to be like, hey, I don't want to play against this guy. He's at this level. Or, hey, I do want to play against this guy. I want to be the King of the Hill. I want to challenge him. I want to see how good I am. And then if you get stomped, you get stomped. But it's your choice to do that. That is what's super important. But anyway, that's the end of this video. I'm sorry for the long-winded rant about this, but I wanted to go over exactly what the issues are and how exactly we can fix them. I want advanced movement shooters to be a lot more popular. I want Conclave to do so much better. And I just want the best for Warframe and all of these other games that I mentioned. I really do want people to learn from the mistakes of the past and just expand on them and just, know what they're doing when they're making these kinds of games, especially when a new game like Impulse is coming out and they are going to end up making the same mistakes. And it hurts me when I, see that somebody's just like, that you could have done better. And that you're going to end up in the same pit of destruction. It's sad, but at the end of the day, you have to learn from other people's mistakes and you have to better things for yourself. But yeah, that's all for this video. I do want you to make sure that you share this to somebody who is knowledgeable or plays a lot of advanced movement shooter games such as Apex Legends and Titanfall. And I'll see you guys in the next video.